actually went to Lancaster University to study visual arts. Growing up, I was a passionate artist and graphic designer, and that's what I wanted to do. And I went to Lancaster University because it happened to be near the Lake District, because I was a big climber as well, so that was a big draw for me. But when I arrived at Lancaster, I didn't actually realise, I hadn't done the research, and I realised that you had to do another subject in your first year, and I really didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. I just wanted to paint and sculpt and make things. And and there happened to be, there are all manner of choices, but I really wasn't certain what to do, and there happened to be a really great theatre studies department. So in my first year, I started, I took theatre studies, and I started to make things for sets, design sets and make props and design posters for shows. And then gradually during the first year, I got involved in productions, and I started to act, playing small roles. At the end of the first year, I played the lead role in a play by Barry Keefe called Gotcha. And I happened to work with a student director who was very much into Stanislavski, and we went through this whole kind of method of kind of Stanislavski's method to build a character. And I did this play, and literally at the end of doing that play, I went, I'm not going to be an artist, I'm going to be an actor. Phoned up my parents, told them I wanted to become an actor. Great big silence at the end of the phone. It was bad enough they wanted, me being an artist, but me being an actor was about as bad as it got. And that was it. So from then, I changed my degree, and you could build your own degree there at Lancaster using a sort of a module system. And I went about creating an independent studies degree in, I think I called it theatre design and movement, and just basically built my own courses and studied movement, sort of all sorts of dancers I was following and studying, and theatre practitioners, Brecht, Stanislavski, all of these things, sort of building up a knowledge.
One thing that you said there particularly struck me, the fact that, quite apart from the visual arts that originally drew you to Lancaster, and then your interest in acting, movement and dance were a fairly early enthusiasm of yours?
Yeah, I suppose the combination of character, and it was sort of character-based movement, was of great interest to me. And obviously that was going to play a part later on, although at the time I really didn't know how or why.
Having got your equity card, you joined, I understand, a series of touring companies, and you got into, if I've got it right, acting some of the big Shakespearean roles. What sort of influence did that have on you?
Yeah, actually the first job that I had was at this local theatre called the Duke's Playhouse in Lancaster, and I did 14 plays back to back, rehearsing during the day and performing at night. In a true old-fashioned rep system, it was a proper theatre education, which it was very hard to have that kind of education anymore. But the great thing about it was that the director who ran the theatre, a man called Jonathan Petherbridge, was an extraordinary man who had a real vision for the theatre and its place in the community. He really truly believed that art theatre was there to change society, and that the job of the actor was to go and research, find information, bring it back, share it with an audience in a way that would, it was quite a sort of political with a small p. That has always defined my attitude towards acting in a way, that it is a service, that it's something that is for the benefit of others, you come back literally sharing your evidence with an audience, the work that you do, and I'm really grateful for that. I work with someone with that vision, really.
One of the Shakespearean roles that I understand you did was the fool in King Lear, which on the face of it sounds like the perfect introduction to the kind of thing that you're doing, a very physical role in a play full of meaning.
Absolutely. That was, in fact, so after the Duke's Playhouse, I went on tour with a number of different theatre companies, and then I found myself in London, which is where I actually played the Fool in King Lear. And that was with a director called Max Stafford Clark, and I did another play with him, which is perhaps more appropriate for the sort of work, I suppose, that I would end up doing. The Fool was a very physical character. But this other play I did at the Royal Court Theatre was called Hush by a woman called April De Angelis, and I played a character called Dog Boy in that play, and Dog Boy was a young homeless youth who had mental issues, and he had a dog, and in the course of the play he kills his dog, and he becomes his dog. He kills it, and he breaks into this middle-class household, and the play is about their choices in reaction to this event. So how they all dealt with this homeless youth who, and I was stark naked, and that was one of the first plays my dad came to see. And, so his premonition of me becoming an actor had borne fruit. Just what I love about acting and loved and what I was learning to discover was the art of transformation, really. That the liberation of being able to say something about the human condition by putting yourself under the microscope, but actually the characters that have enabled me to do that the most, I think, have been ones that have been much, much further away from myself. So you're always putting that part of you under scrutiny, or if there's a Venn diagram, it's kind of where it crosses over between you. But the further away that the character was from me, it seemed, the more I was able to find a sort of artistic truth, if that makes sense.
Did you find it liberating, that idea of being non-human?
Very much so. But yeah, absolutely. You're leading the audience through a journey, and it allows the audience to experience the human condition through a different prism, and that I find and always have done fascinating.
Before we get on to the way that particular art developed, I'd like to talk a little bit about the television work you've done a lot of television work over the years, but the earlier television work where you were playing characters like Einstein and Bill Sikes. Tell us a little about how that came about, what impact that had on the development of your art.
Yeah, I mean, I've always really enjoyed a deep level of kind of research into characters. So I really, the things that made me, that I concentrated on was, well, what's made me feel most alive in my life? I think witnessing the birth of my children that were all born at home in my house was about the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. So when I'm playing someone who's taking life, I'm able to use that as a substitute for that. So you end up substituting things that you go through emotionally to create. I mean, that's the basis of acting. You're tricking your mind and your body by using your own personal experience to connect with something that isn't you.
And of course, in some ways, you push that to the extreme once you get into the area of performance capture and becoming creatures that do not even exist. Can you tell us how you got into performance capture in the first place?
Well, I got a call from actually, I was actually playing Bill Sikes at the time. We were shooting in Prague, and I got a call from my then agent saying, "Look, they're making this film of Lord of the Rings down in New Zealand, and they want someone to do the voice for a digital character in Lord of the Rings." And I said, "Well, look, Lord of the Rings has got a dozen really good parts in it. Can you not get me up for something decent? I'm not a voice actor, and I don't really want to do a voice for a digital character. So can you just see what's going on?"
How about a dwarf or something, perhaps?
And so then they said, "Well, we're not quite sure what it is exactly, but it's Gollum, and it's." And I was going, "Oh, right, well, I remember Gollum from The Hobbit. I read The Hobbit. I hadn't read Lord of the Rings at the time." And they said, "Well, we're not quite sure how it works, but you've got to audition for it." So I thought, well, how am I going to audition for this? I'm not a voice. I really am not I'm not one of those actors who's like a mimic or can go in or do voices or impressions or, that's not me. I have to go into the character to find a voice as part of building a character. And So I started to think about how I could approach this, and I was at home and reading. I started reading Lord of the Rings, and knew I was going to be auditioning, and thinking, how am I going to do this? So I started reading, and Gollum is obviously the power of the ring engulfs this being and twists and contorts him, and he's called Gollum because of the way he sounds, and he says Gollum, Gollum, and I'm thinking, how am I gonna approach this? Where does this character carry his guilt and pain? Where does and it was his throat. Oh, so okay, well, let's think. Okay, so maybe his throat's really constricted. Okay, well maybe what is the ring? Well, the ring's a bit like an obsession. Maybe it's like an addiction. Maybe he's like an addict. So I started to think about along the terms of him being like a heroin addict or a cocaine, like someone who is obsessed by something, and unless they get it, they're going to go crazy. And then I was thinking, well, physically, how am I going to find this? And I wanted to find something that the effect of the ring had an involuntary action on it made him spasm in some way. And then this is gospel truth. My cat came into the room, and Diz, his name is Diz, no longer with us, and came in and started coughing up furballs in front of me. And as he was coughing up furballs, the whole of his head through to the tip of his tail was doing this kind of weird action, and he started going like that. So that then became sort of and that was sort of the genesis of that voice. So I went in for the audition, and I jumped up on
with a furball,
thinking a furball, and jumped up on the chair and sort of started doing a version of which wasn't the actual. It was sort of a version of that for the casting director John Hubbard, who sat there and he was reading off lines and he just went. Like that, and so I thought, oh no, he thinks this is terrible. I think this is a complete disaster. I've really screwed this one up. And anyway, so that then got sent off to Peter Jackson, and it came back. They wanted to actually meet me, so I met with them at the American Church in London. And as soon as I laid eyes on Peter Jackson and his wife Fran Walsh, I sort of fell in love with them. Literally fell in love with them when I first met them. And he said, "No, look, we don't." He explained the process. He said, "I want an actor to play Gollum, but we can't finally manifest him on screen with an actor because you could never cast someone who's 3.5 foot tall and that wiry and skinny and emaciated and twisted and with a slightly larger head. We'd never find an actor to do that. So we're going to animate him finally, or he will be manifested using CG finally. But we want an actor to play him because we don't want the actors playing Sam and Frodo to have to imagine what's going on inside this guy's head, by looking at a tennis ball on a stick." So, because at that time that's how visual effects were created, and so I said, well, look, I'd love the idea of this challenge, and he said, yeah, we're toying with this idea of using this technology which has come out of the medical industry called motion capture. It went from sort of thinking I was just going to be doing this voice to actually being down in New Zealand for 1.5 years on set. I turned up. I did some lots more sort of physical research, worked out how Gollum would move and think and feel and be and behave. And my first shot in Lord of the Rings was, obviously it was 3 films, but they were all shot concurrently. And my first shot was scene 729, which was halfway up Mount Doom, trying to stop Frodo and Sam getting to the top. And so I found myself in New Zealand, 6,500 feet up a mountain, in a lycra suit, with the crew not knowing why the hell I was there, and Peter Jackson laughing at me. And we did this scene, and then when he saw what I was doing, he said, okay, we're going to sort of reconfigure this. We're not going to just animate the character, and we're going to literally copy every single movement that Andy does, and we're going to copy every single facial expression that he's doing, and he's going to become the template for this digital character. So this began this, this went on and on, throughout the course of Lord of the Rings. It got refined and changed, and all this technology was evolving as we were shooting. And when we came to the end of the Return of the King, Peter Jackson invited me over to lunch. It happened to be my birthday, and he gave me one of the original rings from Lord of the Rings and said, "This is for you. And would you like to play King Kong?" And I went, and I was thinking, what? And he said, yeah, that's the next thing we're doing, and we'd like you to play King Kong. And I was like, So this was the moment, really. That was the second epiphany of my life, other than you're going to become an actor, which was, I've just been playing this 3.5-foot ring junkie, and now I'm going to play a 25-foot gorilla. This surely is the end of typecasting as we know it. This is brilliant. This is amazing. This is a tool which enables the actor to become anything you want to be. It's like Mr. Ben. You go into the shop and you dress up and you can become anything. It's brilliant. So I said yes, of course, and then the journey of King Kong started, which was the next phase of my life in New Zealand. I've spent years and years and years down in New Zealand making films with my great friends Peter Jackson, Fran Welsh and Philippa Boyens. I mean, it was such an amazing experience. So I then found myself up in Rwanda researching mountain gorillas, and London Zoo researching gorillas in captivity, and finding out who King Kong was, and trying to find the journey for King Kong was in the original 1933 version. Kong was very much a monster. He was very much a sort of an image of what people thought gorillas were at the time, which were, because there hadn't been many spotted, or they were always seen through the trees as these mysterious creatures who were violent, sort of chest thumping creatures, and there hadn't been 70 years of Discovery Channel or David Attenborough or Diane Fossey or any of that. None of that had happened, so there was no understanding. People were afraid of gorillas, which is why he was portrayed as a monster. I wanted to make him, having been on that journey, very much a gorilla, a silverback gorilla.
Let me ask you this, because I can see how liberating it would be to realise I can be anything, which is obviously a marvellous thing. Presumably there are some downsides to the technical challenges of motion capture, performance capture. Tell us about how it works in relation to your relationship with other actors, and also, you mentioned you were up on the mountain at the beginning, and then Peter Jackson said, no, we've got to go and do this properly, which puts you in a studio, in a motion capture studio, as opposed to interacting most of the time with the real world. How do you deal with those problems? And do you find them problems anymore, or are they just second nature now?
No, I didn't ever find the problem because I did shoot every single scene on location with those actors. But no, I've never found that there's been any sort of anything that's in the way of working with any other actors, because at the end of the day, when you're acting with someone, all you're doing is looking into their eyes, and it's the chemistry that happens between you. So it doesn't matter at all that I'm not wearing a costume and makeup, and that I'm wearing dots all over my face. Other actors might for 5 minutes when they're looking at me think that, but actually that goes away after. We are so used to using our imaginations. That's what we do. We transport ourselves into these characters, and we believe the other actor, and it's the act of believing that other actor that enables you to be real, and it's about that chemistry. So as long as you're looking into the eyes of a great actor and you're working with them, it doesn't matter what you're wearing, quite frankly. And the technology evolved in that over the years we took it out of, as you say, from inside a motion capture volume, and being able to shoot on sets and never having to go back and repeat it again. With the addition of head-mounted cameras and being able to take all the motion capture cameras, put them out on locations, put them out on set. So during the course of working on the Apes trilogy, for instance, that then, we literally took it further and further away from sets and out onto location. And this last one, War for the Planet of the Apes, we were up to our waist in snow, terrible rain, wind conditions, and the technology is so robust now that it stands up.
I wanted to ask you about that, because obviously the interesting thing, with Gollum and Lord of the Rings, it was a brand new franchise. With Planet of the Apes, it was a movie that was originally in the 60s, and you were picking up and rethinking the franchise, and in effect focusing on different aspects of the story. How did you approach creating Caesar, creating that character Caesar?
I was sent the script for this film, and it was having had already played King Kong. People said, "Well, why are you doing another ape? And you're not going to get typecast as apes then? You know what's going on?" And I'm like, I said, and I'd read the script, and it was the most amazing story of this being that grew up and thinking he was one thing, realizing he was another, becomes a revolutionary, leads his kind to freedom. Breaks the chains of bondage and starts a new society. And it happened to be an ape. It was just like, it was a brilliant character, the most incredible character, and also happened to be an ape. So that was the way I looked at it. And I approached Caesar really very much as a human in an ape's skin, because he was brought up with human beings, and apes do, if they're brought up in captivity, really do reflect human behaviour a lot more. But he's not just an ape. He's not just a chimpanzee. He's a chimpanzee that has this Alzheimer's cure drug coursing through his veins, which is inadvertently, the end of humanity. It has an adverse effect on human beings, but accelerates the evolution of these apes. So it was a really incredible journey and I based him on a real chimpanzee called Oliver, who was in the 1970s. He was known as the humanzee. He was a bipedal ape who had facial expressions that were incredibly human. And so this notion of Caesar as an outsider, as this, not quite belonging to the world of ape or man, was really what started off the journey for me. And over the course of the three films, there were lots of different sources of inspiration. But to start with, there's this orphaned chimpanzee who felt human, who then in his teenage realizes he almost sees his skin for the first time as he's cast out and considered aggressive, thrown into a sanctuary with other apes. But because he has this he has this outsider quality to him, he also has this empathy for not just chimpanzees, but for all different kinds of apes, and therefore became a leader, because he's able to not see the difference in other. And so this great empathy is sort of grows with him.
Can I ask you? Can I jump in to ask about this, because this is you had this extraordinary career going, and yet you decided to expand in a different way in terms of setting up your own production company, Imaginarium.
Yeah.
What was the object? What was your plan for Imaginarium?
The visual arts kind of original background that I had, I'd always sort of hankered after telling stories from a visual perspective, not just inhabiting the characters. I mean, I buried myself into acting because I needed to do that. I really wanted to do that. But there was always this desire to also make and tell stories. So I'd started to make short films, and when I came back from making King Kong, I was asked to direct some performance capture for video games for a company called Ninja Theory, and it was a game called Heavenly Sword. And this was like at a time when, video games were beginning to become treated with, rather than just being sort of hack and slash kind of, button pressing, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you, they become the potential to be interactive movies with really good scripts and interesting characters, and asking you as a player to be immersed in the sort of the moral compass of it all. The journey you were the journey of the character, and scripts were becoming much more defined and like in interactive movies, and performance therefore became more important. So I was asked to direct the capture for this game, and I cast it and with some great actors. And we rehearsed it like a film or a play, and in fact we ran the whole game as a play. And then I came to shoot it, and there wasn't anywhere in the UK that we could shoot it. The technology wasn't available, and which was ridiculous, because actually the technology was built in Cambridge and the software was made in Oxford. And yet I ended up taking the entire production over to New Zealand, back to New Zealand, to actually make it with Weta, the visual effects company that I'd been working with for a long time. And so I thought to myself, this is absolutely nuts. Why haven't we got somewhere in the UK that has this sort of facility? So I went about thinking, well, how can we do this? I want to have a UK-based digital hub, a digital home, a sort of a theatre for the creation of furthering the art and craft of performance capture across lots of different medium. And that's when Jonathan and I met. I'd had a film script that I wanted to develop and was talking to him, a traditional film script, and we decided to pool our resources, bring his producerial skills and my desire to make this new kind of environment, and we pooled them all together and formed the Imaginarium with the express idea of asking ourselves the question: how will stories be received in 10, 20, 30 years' time? What will we all be doing? How will will we be sitting watching a screen? Will we be immersed? Is it theatre? Is it a combination of virtual reality and theatre? And, because it's shifting, things are shifting. Of course, since then, all these things have started to come into play.
Nevertheless, your directorial debut, I would say, it's the film Breathe, which I think BAFTA will be showing in the next couple of weeks, which is coming out this weekend. It's an extraordinary film, I can testify, but it's very much more a traditional form of experience about someone who is stricken with polio. What was it that led you to say, this is the first movie I want to direct?
I read Breathe, which was this extraordinary script by Bill Nicholson, who wrote Gladiator and Everest and Long Walk to Freedom, and actually Elizabeth, I think, The Golden Age, I think he wrote that. And it was the most powerful script I think I've read in my life as an actor or director. It was the most touching, emotional piece of writing, and it was a true story. It's Jonathan's parents' story, and I came in the next day and I said to Jonathan, look, I don't know how to tell you this. I know we've been looking for directors for this, and I know we're setting up to do Animal Farm and then all these other extraordinary futuristic things, but I really would like to have a crack at, and I know I'm sort of used to directing orcs and elves and dwarves and all things like that, but I really fancy having a crack at directing your parents' life story. What do you think? And he said, yeah, I think that's a great idea. Let's do it. There was a period of a window of opportunity where we suddenly found that we could shoot Breathe. So Andrew Garfield and Claire Foy, who are the stars of the film, became available, and we jumped on it, and we raised the money for this film, Breathe, in 7 weeks, and we shot it in 7 weeks. And meanwhile, I was still editing Jungle Book. So it was a really crazy kind of time earlier this year and last year, where 2 films were being made simultaneously. But in actual fact, Breathe, because it was a much smaller production and it had no visual effects in it whatsoever. Well, a little bit, but not too much. Is the thing that has inadvertently become my directorial debut, and Jungle Book will be sort of following on fairly soon.
Do you feel pleased with Jungle Book? One of the interesting things about Jungle Book is the fact that it has been done before in various forms. And I imagine one of the challenges is, how can I do this in a way which is not just technically original but also feels different?
Well, ours is very much a darker, a sort of, I would say, tonally closer to Rudyard Kipling's book. And ours is very much a Mowgli-centric story. It's the story of, an outsider. A similar trajectory to Caesar in many ways, actually. He is brought up in the world of animals, and then realises that can't continue, and neither can he be part of the world of man. And so the film is very much about his identity, his true identity, and being of both worlds, and actually and creating his own identity, and our jungle is very much a place of an idyll, but it's also a place of great savagery, and the laws of the jungle are very, very fixed and firm, and ones that Mowgli at a certain point in his life can't adhere to anymore. So it's a PG-13, slightly darker, as I say, very much centering on a great performance by a young actor called Rohan Chand, an American Indian actor who is quite incredible, and then these brilliant performances by and it really feels like our one is very, very much It's like Dickens in the jungle.
Can you look ahead 10 years to what you would like to be achieving?
Yeah, I would very much like to be in a situation where a story can be told in a very multi-platform way, where you can build the world of something that you see on stage. Love to do a big stage production of something that also can live as a film, and that the characters and the assets that you built can translate and migrate between all these different platforms. So the threads of the story can migrate through different, from virtual reality through to theatre, through to I would like to think that there is a link between all of these.
I think that's an adventure we all hope we can go along with you on. And Andy Serkis, I'd like to thank you very much for all your insights during this fascinating